Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Smart Gamer Live. My name is Zaylen. I am here with a number of other guild masters, order masters, whatever we decide we want to call ourselves, of guilds within Camelot Unchained. We're here to talk about issues that matter to guild masters and a little bit of what matters to the community of Camelot Unchained. The first and lovely of the boring disclaimers I have for you: none of us work for CSE. Our opinions are our own, so don't take our word as law, though if you do, I have an underpass to sell you. The second disclaimer, that was a joke, apparently a really bad one since nobody's laughing, but the second disclaimer, we are in beta 1, so any conversations we have about current mechanics or the state of mind for beta, it is beta 1, so please keep that in mind. I just lost somebody and the windows go crazy. All right, so our topic today is talking about guilds in current games that are out there versus guilds that are in old games. How the developers have structured the guilds and built those guilds into the game and how they affect everything. So what does that mean for us as we create guilds to these newer games than it did back in the day? Malice, up to you.
Well, one of the issues that as we have all seen, there has been a change in this the modern titles where they're allowing. I'll use ESO as an example. You can be in 5 different guilds at once. It brings an interesting dynamic in the fact that you can have guilds that are very specialized, but it also brings, to me, a lack of guild identity. As you can kind of make out that I'm big on guild identity, and we have been a very long-running guild, and so it seems very weird and very kind of something for the guild to try to adjust to when it comes to how long we've been around versus and what type of organization we are, as opposed to you get into this very mercurial feel where people are like, well, I'm in 5 different guilds. I'm not really loyal to anything in particular. And, you looked at me funny today. I'm going to drop your guild, as opposed to back in the day where, you stuck it out and you made a community out of your guilds and had this much larger scope of, how you interacted, the friendships that you built and all that type of stuff. And I feel that those friendships kind of can sort of feel lost in the current MMO scape.
I remember back in the day when you would join a guild and that was your group of people, and getting into guilds was this huge process. You had to fill out online applications, you had to do all this stuff just to get in, and God forbid you dropped your guild. And you're right, nowadays it's, oh, I'm going to go jump into this one, or I'm going to jump into this one. Take World of Warcraft, for instance. You jump into a guild, you're mainly in there so that you can go with their raiding group. Somebody pisses you off, they get a piece of loot, they're going to jump over to a different guild and jump into their raiding group. I'm curious what you guys think about how Camelot Unchained has approached, as much as we know, which granted isn't much, since they've got orders and then they have war bands. How is that going to affect guilds for us?
It's going to give the small groups of friends something to do. So, I mean, yeah, you get your small group of friends, that's your war band. So, which I think kind of serves why people even want multiple guilds in the first place, where it's like, oh, I want to be part of a guild, but I also kind of want this like small, loose group for me and my friends, which those kind of things can exist, but it's still not really a guild. And so I guess that's maybe a nice compromise between the two.
I think it's an excellent solution, exactly what Taco was saying, going off of what Taco was saying, to the problem of the solo/few players versus a larger group identity, like our friend Malice was saying. But the truth is that this particular invention is just another brilliant idea from Mark Jacobs to solve these problems. And we haven't seen a lot of mechanics yet implemented for orders, but I do think they're on the horizon. I do think that they're coming because this is a group operated group oriented game, and that's really important to group oriented game is to have your guild mechanics and your warband mechanics down packed before we launch.
That's one issue that I think we might run into in Camelot Unchained, and it's I guess I shouldn't call it an issue. It's a positive or negative depending on how you want to look at it and where you find yourself in the grand scope of things. But like Guild Wars 2, use that as an example. There was a game that really wanted to blur the notion of guilds. Like guilds had value, but at the end of the day, it was all about the larger group. It was all about your server. It was a server identity more than it was about guild identity. And the question is do you lose guild identity when you homogenize things across and make them a too broadly faction acceptable? Excuse me. While we have all been in games that have had very specific guild structures and have had alliance systems and things like that, there doesn't seem like there's going to be really, and it seems to be, that's another thing that seems to be has gone to the way of the dodo is alliances. The actual true functional mechanic for guilds align with each other. It seems like there's going to be an interesting function in Camelot Unchained where you can sign contracts, so you can do temporary alliances for like a task. But overall, there's, as far as I've gathered from what I've read at least, is there is no official alliance system. What do you guys thoughts on alliances?
I think the biggest issue facing any developer when it comes to, and you're talking about guilds and the question of how you allow players to organize themselves is essentially putting a name on different ranges or values of the amounts of players. In other words, so you got to ask yourself, so what is generally, a small group of players? And in games past, we've seen that called a party, and we've seen it organized from anywhere from maybe 5 to 8. With some awkward games sometimes throwing that like a number 3 in there. But generally speaking, we recognize a party as a 5 to 8, and it's a very dynamic system, whereas it's something that is created instantaneously, and it may last a couple hours and it's done. It's created to accomplish a goal, and it's often made up of members within a guild, but it's flexible enough to allow randoms or people you encounter out in the world. And then you have that next group up, which is essentially a static group of like-minded people that doesn't dynamically change. And we see that called the guild, at least historically, what we as players know. And that's more or less what a guild is they have a goal, they have some sort of creed that they adhere to, and everybody comes in and participates in that, moving towards whatever that goal is. I think the problem for Camelot Unchained is they've got to figure out, do they want, like, we know the next step above that we classically call an alliance or a conglomerate of guilds. They have to figure out, do they want that? Do they want players to organize on that level, or do they want each guild to directly answer to what would be, I guess, the NPC server, or the king of your realm, or do they want to allow guilds to unite together in that form of alliance?
JB Hayes points out on Twitter chat here that they have campaigns that can serve as a long-term or short-term I guess team of guilds together that could be alliances. It kind of fits with, it could fit within the lore that you've got a campaign together that's more of a crusade running off to do something.
I think that the nature of the MMO player has also changed too. Me personally, I probably have, maybe 15 years as an MMO player. And everyone's got their own different amount of time, but the field has drastically changed, and it's partially due to the amount of options players have. And it's partially due to the nature of guilds laxing their stringent rules to remain open and flexible for the dynamic nature of people. You know, people come and go and they want to try these different titles. And we have moved our guilds away from the game and into an online space, which we really didn't have before. Back when we were playing, when we were all playing our first MMO, generally speaking, at least initially, your guild existed within that game. And then as another title came out, y'all were like, all right, well, we're moving and we want a way of keeping ourselves together. And that's when a lot of guilds bought a domain. They created an online space for themselves. So we exist, I think, in a different place now where a lot of tools that people expect, like, oh, well, I played games in the past where they had these tools. Devs are like, y'all got Discord, man. Like, and a lot of devs don't have a lot of tools because of that very reason. Is guilds have created their own tools, or a lot of them have their own abilities outside of the game, and it's hard to figure out what's necessary versus like what is a convenience.
So
but
I've actually put a
Taco.
lot of thought into this, as well as thought into how this affects not just guilds, but I would say clans as well. Because keep in mind, I'm not just an MMO player. I've come from running servers in games like Battlefield and everything like that. And I think the best thing that can exemplify online gaming today is, I hate to drop it, but games like Fortnite and the battle royales. And what are these games really about? You have a game that can have 100 players into it. But what is the goal? The goal is to be the one winner out of 100, which ultimately is a very selfish goal, right? You're throwing 100 players into a game, and what is your objective? Your objective is essentially be the one at the top. And you kind of see this where you have it with streaming, where everybody's just trying to be the next meme, the next thing at the top. Everybody's trying to be, hot and cool and all that kind of thing. But ultimately, right as of late, gaming is focused a lot on the individual and individual success. MMOs have, as well as things like shooters, have moved from groups to catering to the individual. And this is where you get into things like Dungeon Finder, into things like matchmaking versus community servers. So with a Dungeon Finder, instead of catering to, say, groups of players congregating and organizing so that way they can do content, it's no, let's make a tool so an individual can press a button and enter the content. And I think the heart of the issue that comes to this is you have multiplayer games, but everything is geared towards the individual. And you ultimately sacrifice community for convenience. And I think that's the heart of why a lot of multiplayer games in general feel very hollow and they feel very lonely. This isn't just MMOs. Like, I can play a game like Battlefield 5 and I get nothing. Whereas I have so many memories of playing Battlefield 2142 or Team Fortress 2 and regularly knowing the people I played with and against. It didn't even have to be people on my friends list, but I had servers I would frequent and I'd be like, hey, I know that guy. He's a really good sniper and that kind of thing. But you don't get that anymore.
I will agree on the point that the convenience of allowing players to be exposed to all forms of the game's, or creating an avenue for the solo player to experience all these things, has definitely eroded the natural forming of the communities. Guilds formed out of a necessity to accomplish goals anyway. So if the goal is handed directly to players, whereas the solo player has a mechanic built into the game where they can accomplish a goal, then yes, what's the point of a guild? You don't need it, unless you have IRL friends that you meet with out of the world, and there, if you find that chance, you're like, oh yeah, I have that same interest, then y'all most likely would potentially form a small guild. But outside of that, you will never find yourself in a guild because you can accomplish all goals without it. Which is, that's very true. And it's not that you can accomplish every goal, it's that you can accomplish many more goals. And the average player, like, you're obviously using WoW as an example, the average player isn't trying to mythic raid. Where back in the day of vanilla WoW, just raiding was what required a guild. And everyone wanted to do it, and then that's what forced it. Where now you're like, well, I can be a solo player, never join a guild, and I can experience all that content. So I do believe that it is a fine balance that game developers, especially the developers Camelot Unchained, they have to find, City State has to find that balance between allowing the solo player to find accessible content and find a place, but at the same time, they have to create these obstacles that naturally force players not to log off, but to instead seek that community that, those of us sitting here are trying to bring into that game.
It's something that I found very interesting, dialing the time, the Wayback Machine all the way back to Dark Age of Camelot, is the dungeon content in there. That just the normal world dungeons had an organic feel of, I was an individual. I walked in the door. I could kill mobs in the entrance room, and I could earn XP just fine. But now a couple more players showed up, and they're doing the same thing. Hey, let's band together, go deeper into the dungeon. Hey, two groups find each other. Hey, we should merge together and make a larger group. Okay, let's go all the way to the bottom of the, and so it had an organic feel of task-driven play. But I would say from a developer standpoint, something, and this is a theory, I feel that, so if you look at it monetarily, always follow the money, right? You look at the Battlefields, you look at the Call of Duties, you look at games like that, and they make filthy amounts of money on their launch month, their first month, their first couple of months. They make money that blows even calculating all the subscriptions together for most MMOs out of the water. And I feel that at the end of the day, what a lot, especially if they have PvP in them, is that MMOs want to draw, and you can see it in the way that they do their combat now. Combat is more fast-paced. You look at the Dark Age of Camelot, the slow swinging combat. It was more tactics than it was about hitting your right button at the with the right twitch reaction. But now you look at even WoW and all of the subsequent games, it's twitch reaction games. At the end of the day, they're trying to draw those first-person shooter players into the MMO gamescape. And because of that, they also are building, I feel that they're eroding the guild system so that they can do that, so they can more effectively draw those players to play MMOs so they can, from a financial standpoint.
I would actually argue against that. And I would just submit the point that I think more or less what we've seen is we've seen a progressing forward of engines, which have allowed for much more fluid combat. And I would use a game like Guild Wars 2 or Blade and Soul, which in my opinion have the most fluid combat of any MMO you'll ever play to date. And they're extremely fun. And from a pen and paper standpoint, you're like, yeah, that person beat me because they have better reactions to me. And that, quite frankly, could be true. But they're just another drop in the bucket. It's everything's not for everyone. And that's where you kind of got to they didn't have games with fluid combat, and so a couple have just introduced, and they might be after that, but I don't think that's their sole goal of trying to get the FPS person. I think it's just they have an engine, it does something unique, and they want to give it a whirl because it's a unique point of the market that's not been tapped into, is having an action-based MMO. And I think we're getting more of those, but because frankly, the gameplay can be a lot more fun at times.
So for my Camelot, sorry.
I was just going to throw another thing into this discussion on the changing of the guild development here. How much are the developers being affected by the generational change? You have games like the early days of Dark Age of Camelot, where now most of those old souls are, quite frankly, they're old souls. It's a different generation, a different time. You tackle things differently. You valued that group play, that working with people, more so than potentially today's generation that gets in there. They want to accomplish something really quick. They want to have that victory, that piece of loot in their hand, and then they're done. And they move on to the next thing.
Instant gratification. And also, I think monetization also plays a factor as well. Now, in the old days, if you wanted to look cool, you had to raid, right? When you saw someone that had like top tier raid gear and they looked awesome, you're like, man, that guy looks awesome. What do I have to do that? Well, you got to raid. Nowadays, every game has a cash shop, and it's like, oh, if I want to look cool, what do they have here? Here's $10, and I got this stuff that makes me look cool or unique or whatever. You mean
surprise mechanics?
Yes. And one thing that kind of exemplifies this is with World of Warcraft. They just came out with a shiny new, I think it was a dragon mount, and you had to put in, like before the end of June, you had to put in a 6-month subscription to get it. And I saw someone point this out. It's like, oh, hey, their Q2 fiscals need to be in, so they're probably doing this as a cash grab, right? But ultimately, in the long run, what's more effective? Selling that to push subscriptions, or take that really cool mount that everyone really wants, put it in the hardest raid possible as a drop. And all of a sudden, people are spending months just trying to get it. They may not even get it, but they're still going to be trying.
Like the old WoW Phoenix mount.
Yeah. And it's just, it's the mentality of the players as well as these companies. They want their money now. They're looking into the short term and not the long term, which you have a game like EVE Online or probably Camelot. Camelot's going to have a subscription fee to it, but they're not aiming to have millions and millions of players. They'll be quite content with what they get, I'm sure. But it's just different mentalities.
Taking that step forward just real quick is what we've just discussed. Now, Camelot Unchained, the combat is much slower outside the box. Like, you play it, it is more, I mean, it's not Dark Age or Camelot slow, but it is definitely slowing the game down. How is that going to impact things? And you go right ahead and make your comment.
I was going to say that it's really about attracting two different types of players. An older generation, which is still very viable economically, or a younger generation, which is more numbers but less viable economically. So which one is the developer going to do, if not both? Because usually the style of play for those of us with the long beards that are gray, it tends to be the slower mechanics. What Taco was talking about in terms of long-term rewards, that tends to be our style, that our dedication. However, younger players would want the solo play, and they're the ones agitating on the forums, or for the most part, for solo play to be more viable. Now, they shouldn't be locked out, but they should also recognize that from the beginning, the developers have said this is a group-oriented gameplay. Regardless of what they do, how they implement it, it is group-oriented.
So bringing us back around to the main topic at hand here, the differences between old style guilds and new style guilds, something practical just to hear from you guys. Kind of give me a brief how you used to recruit for guilds back in the day when they were a lot more group minded, and then how you would recruit in today's gaming market, and maybe even specifically within Camelot Unchained. How are you going to approach recruiting the players that the developers have aimed the game at?
I'll take that first because for us it hasn't changed one bit. Not since the AOC. It's recruit by example. You know, you have your players act how you want your guild represented, and when people see that, when people experience that, and if they'd like to be a part of that, you know, they come out and they seek you. You know, we see a lot of guilds just bolstering numbers by spamming in chat and stuff like that. But it's speaking from personal standpoint, it's never really been the goal. It's you know, you have your players act a certain way. You have them just represent your guild in a good light, or as best the light that they feel is necessary, and you know, that brings people in. You know, and it's little things. You know, it's things where helping people out, and that's where it's where modern games, and you see this especially in the Asian market, where they take away things like trading, they take away things like content that requires multiple people in the open world to accomplish. You know, and it tears down that social fabric where guilds have always existed, where they have basically just been a necessity. And when guilds aren't a necessity, when group content is not a necessity, you will not have healthy guilds. It's just, that's just the state of the game. So not to drag it on, but it's just act by example, or act how you want people to act, and when they see that, you know, they will inquire.
I have a different example, but a similar ethos. I recruit simply by meeting the player one-on-one and getting to talk to them in a channel or over voice comms or something, getting to know the player. While I haven't changed this method since I've started playing, I prefer to know my players, even if my guild does not grow at the rate of other guilds. It does grow with quality players that I've hand selected, so it tends to gel better once they're inside.
Oh, I completely agree. I would, following that line of logic, I have always been a quality over quantity. I mean, I want a player that is goal driven, is desiring to, whether be successful in the game through PvP, or even if they're, you know, big raiders or whatever they want to accomplish, as long as they're willing to drive that forward, you know, the guild is always willing to be part of that and help support those networks. But if you're not goal driven, you're looking to be, you know, coddled and dragged through, you tend to not find Plague to be the most comfortable place to be.
Okay, so you guys are dancing around the theology behind recruiting. How do you recruit now as opposed to how you did back then? Talking to people's great, but in a sea of hundreds of guilds, take Star Wars, for instance. You've got hundreds upon hundreds of guilds on the two main servers. You've got maybe 3 or 4 guilds that have close to 1,000 players each. There's continual spamming going on in the proverbial trade/general chats of the city. That's nothing but crap. How do you distinguish yourself? And then how do you get players to go, I want to be in that guild?
True story. In Star Citizen, I recruited a guy about a year ago at gunpoint.
I'll give you a better anecdotal example rather. It's just you bring your core in and you play the game. I don't think anyone wants to just spam so and so, like blah blah blah, looking for blah blah blah. No one wants to do that. So like in a PvP game, you bring your core group in. You guys figure out what you can do, and you do it, and you do it publicly. You know, people will see your success, and then they're like, I want to be a part of that. And they send you a message. It's just a tell. You just get a message. You get a whisper. You're like, hey, I'm, like what you guys are doing and possibly interested in joining your guild. I mean, that's how we have always recruited. And no, we don't have humongous numbers, but we have people that came to us because they had a desire to be a part of what they saw. And I think that's the most important thing, is having people approach you and not approaching them like, you want to join my guild? Like, never doing that. But always,
I'm quite good at that, Puka.
being an example, accomplishing a goal and doing it publicly, because I mean, all the WW and PvP in the games we want is very public. And accomplishing those goals and having people be like, I want to be a part of that. That's what's always worked for us.
I also don't think that my system of approaching people one-on-one or having my officers approach people one-on-one is out of date. In fact, if nothing, it stands out.
No, but I think what he's after is, what, for you as a guild leader, what is a criteria that would make a person approachable by you? I think that's the answer he's looking for.
Absolutely. The criteria is this: I look for what you're interested in doing. If it matches up with my guild, what your personality is in approaching that goal. Whether I've seen it in Discords, whether I've seen it in game, or whether I've seen it in the forums. And if those three things sort of match up, and I think this could be a good potential, and I would like to explore, I invest some time into it to say, hey, listen, I'll set aside some time. Let's talk a little bit. And if they take that next step, then that's that next step where I can basically interview them while talking to them, but not the hard sell. I'm not trying to hard sell anybody.
So for you, for Camelot Unchained, you're approaching people that you find to be somewhat like-minded to your guild on the forums right now. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
So one could say that you're actively going out and looking for people that fit your mold. And then when you see someone that comes close to that, you're going after them. Whereas,
sounds like to me, yeah.
Whereas Puka seems to be kind of the opposite, whereas they're just going to be present and they're going to maintain the character of their guild at all times. They're going to maintain the quality in everything that they do and hope that people notice.
So to kind of build on that, like for example, Zeeb, he's actively recruiting through the forums for Camelot Unchained. So me with HOL, we have not done any of that. Camelot Unchained is not a released game, right? So we have not done that at all. So the question, if you were to ask me now, like, how are you recruiting for Camelot Unchained? I'd be like, great. Because what we are doing is we are staying active in similar titles. And we are bringing our values and we are bringing our core and displaying that in similar titles and drawing that interest and just finding people, because people are still interested in other games. And once we bring them in as a member of the guild, they will travel to other games with us. And those are the people I really want in my guild. I don't want people that are like, I'm here to play X game with you. I want people that are like, I'm here to be a part of your guild. So wherever you go, whatever game that is, I'm here for the people, not the game. Those are the members I'm after.
You would say that your guild is more of a gaming community than just
absolutely. It's definitely not tied to any game whatsoever. Yeah, our game can change all the time, So, and that's the thing, is we're after a member that wants to be with us, not wants to accomplish X goal in the game. We do accomplish the goals in the game, but it's the side effect is because we want to play together. The side effect is we accomplish these goals in games.
But to further bite into the original history of the topic, is how is that affecting you? Because I know it's affecting me, because I have exactly that, a gaming community. We literally have a council that has guild leaders that run certain games and things like that, and we have a council and rulership above that. How do you find it's harder to find players that are willing to have that level of loyalty to a guild, where I found it was a lot easier in the past, whereas people are much more mercurial in their relationship with guilds, so that they're not interested in, they're like, oh, well, I'm going to play, whatever, and as soon as you guys leave, I'm switching guilds to whatever to stick around here because that's what I'm doing.
I can tell you in my experience, it's about 1 in 10. 1 in 10 in the games we pick up will stay with us for years to come.
Yep.
And that is completely fine with me. And yeah, keeping a guild alive in MMOs in 2019, everyone here in this channel knows, oh my gosh, this is hard. It's a wasteland out there of games. And at the same time, there's so much choice and everyone wants to play something different. It's so difficult.
I would also say one thing about players and their choices and it being mercurial. Players have the right to leave a guild or be part of multiple guilds as they want. It's as long as they have the time to dedicate to guilds in order to put in their face once in a while. I don't see a problem with being a part of multiple guilds. I'd like to put this out to the other GMs. How do you guys feel about it? Because my community is completely open to this.
The way I have it set up, because one thing I'll say is a lot of the stuff I'm doing in Star Citizen right now is going to be transferring over to Camelot Unchained. It's just that one is, you can play in one, but not the other, right? And I guess, sorry, having a brain fart here.
Do you want us to come back to you, Potaco?
Yeah.
I'll say
Jeopardy
I will
music
never
going next
limit
time.
a person. I will never limit a person. I'll never tell them. I mean, if they're not drawn to us and they don't want to spend their time with us, then we're not for them. You know what I mean? And it's like you can't put a rule. We don't have any rules on attendance or anything like that.
Right.
You can't put that rule in there. If they want to play, this is ultimate. We're playing video games, guys. And if they want to play, then they'll come and play with you. And if not, then they won't. And it's like, it's at the end of the day, you don't like tell your friends like, you don't want to play with this. I have to go be your friend. This is like you just
Well,
tell them,
just
hey,
like that, actually.
this is what we're doing. If you want to participate, come participate. If not,
Well, Puka does have
My
members in
official-
chat that are saying that if you can survive a night in
What are they
Discord
saying?
chat with Puka, you're in.
oh gosh,
Daddy
Oh,
Puka.
that's
my
Excuse me,
guildies.
Daddy
That's my
Puka. I got to
guildies.
be specific.
Daddy Puka.
Daddy Puka. There's a story behind
One
that, I'm
thing-
sure.
So, okay.
Oh,
I
yeah,
got
it
it.
was Lancer. Yeah.
All right, Taco.
So, my official stance is I want a place that you want to come and roll with us. I don't want to spend time chasing people who might be inactive or whatever. I ain't got time for that. So, I'm not going to be enforcing any rules of you must be with us or you're against us, that kind of thing. I'd rather just make a cool community, make a cool organization or order or guild that you want to be in. The caveat to that, at least for the Star Citizen side, not necessarily Camelot, is in that we're probably going to run into more of an Eve situation where people are going to be trying to infiltrate and stuff like that. So our only rules are if you're in other groups, you must disclose that information to us. Otherwise, by all means, you do you.
And another thing I'd like to point out, it's all fine to be open to, let people be wherever they want. But that is, again, in my opinion, in a game where there are not limitations on guild members and you don't have a line waiting to get in. If you got a line of people that want to get in and you have people that aren't playing with your guild or they're spending more time with another one of their guilds, like their seat's lost. I'm sorry. I am speaking from a point where you don't have like that contingency in place, like you've always got to cater to the people that want to be there, and not like save a seat for
Absolutely.
someone that never shows up.
Because your guild ultimately is not you. It's not any of us 4 or 5. Sorry, I was counting the host as not being a guildmaster. For a moment, it was just his host duties took over. But it's really who we have as members that count as the guild. That's the idea. It's not just my personality that matters. Who's the officers? Who's the other players? Who's the active players? That's what really matters in a guild, and that's what makes up your personality. You can set the rules, you can set the agenda all you want as a leader, but who you get initially as those first 3, 4, 5 core members of a group is the guild for all intents and purposes.
So playing on that, and that's perfect. if you've got people that are not wanting to join your guild, your order, your clan, whatever you want to call it, but they play with you on a regular basis, they're one of those players that you're like, hey, Zeb, we're going to go tear down this keep over here. Do you want to come? Sure, anytime. How do you deal with players like that, since we're saying that our guilds are mostly communities more than guilds? And at what point do you say is a guild necessary?
Well, it's at that point where I'm thankful I'm on the Arthurian side, because then I can be like, here's your red shirt. There you go. Frontline infantry.
Peasant levies to the rescue for Taco and.
Yeah, it is actually one of the reasons why I liked the alliance system in. I'll use Dark Age of Camelot as an example. I really like the alliance system because, like, my foundation of Plague was based on 8-man content. So we were like Elite Strike Force 8-mans. And none of the guilds, and because of the way that 8-man ran in Dark Age of Camelot, they were cults of personality. You had a leader, you had maybe 10, 15 members of that guild, and we were all allied so that we could swap out people as needed. Like, oh, we really need a filler healer or whatever like that. But other than that, we stayed to our own blocks. And I find that alliances and systems like that fix a problem. And I guess multi-guild systems could do this. Is I like you. Most guilds are cults of personality. At the end of the day, they're there to people join your guild because they like the leadership, they like how you run things, and they're loyal to you because of that. And they may run with these other guys, they may do other things like that, and that's great, but at the end of the day, they're following your cult of personality. And that's why I find alliances so much more effective, is it allows smaller groups to gather together and get larger tasks done while still following their own personal cults of personality. Because, at the end of the day, I don't really want to take orders from Puka. He seems like a jerk, and I don't like people with that big a beard.
Shame.
And Malice, you've got Georgie91 who wants you to have his babies.
Yep.
And I'll add too. So if I have a member running with us all the time, I mean, question number one: are they already in a guild? If they're hesitant of joining your guild, most likely the answer to that is. And maybe they're just running with you because their guild raids at a different time, or their guild's main group time is just a separate time, and that's why they don't want to join. Always just have a conversation, They're like, hey, if they say I'm just in another guild, that's cool. Don't push it. But
their guild is usually just like close friends or something like that,
Well, maybe, but they could just have another guild and they happen to be on at a different time, and they happen to play with both your times. You don't know the whole story, and that's where conversation answers all that. That said, if you feel someone is very compatible with your group, that's kind of the time where maybe I would push it. If you find someone that's personality really jives. And they're cutting jokes in Discord and raids, and everyone in the group's having a good time. It's like, this might be a person I want to push to actually acquire, and you don't look at them. You would instead look at them as more of an asset. And that's where it's like, I want what this person brings in my guild. And they out there, they exist, they're rare. But they can happen, so you always have to weigh everything. I don't think there's ever really a black and white answer.
Oh, yeah.
To any of that. It's just you kind of got to play all that by ear and just see where they fall. And like y'all said, a lot of times if it is another guild, and that's where you as a guild leader definitely need to be active in running with other guilds all the time. And your members need to be doing the same thing. They need to be coming back to you and be like, I ran with so-and-so, this is what they did. I ran with so-and-so, this is what they did. And you need to be active and always exploring other guilds. You can't just shut yourself down, but that's how you find, alliances, and that's how you find like-minded guilds where you respect the boundaries of each other, and you respect, their allegiances within it. But you guys, especially when like the guild is the same guild on paper, you will find other guilds that are like, we're the same guild, guys. What's going on? Doesn't mean you'll have to merge. It just means like y'all are probably great alliance potential candidates. And I mean, I'm not going to tell any leader how to lead, but it's like,
well, you've hit on a great
you
point.
might look
I think
into
for Camelot Unchained is that you've got guilds that are going to be really good at different things, and when you go out on a large scale assault, when we go to chop down all kinds of trees in TDD
Whoa,
over there,
whoa.
yeah,
Wait a minute.
we're going to have guilds that get
mushroom
up with
bombs,
us
man.
that are really good at certain things within that assault. It's going to make taking down keeps so much easier. They're really good at this kind of infiltration. They're really good with these types of siege equipment. They're really good at this. And if you don't have that large group of people and those many, many, many skills, it's going to make that RVR a lot more difficult.
We might run into situations where we have things like the depths, which are supposed to be in the middle of the world map. Maybe one or two guilds runs as protection, making sure the other two factions aren't pushing in, so other guilds can go into the depths and get the riches out of it, right? You're going to have that meta of coordinating fronts.
It'll be interesting to see what they do with alliances on that.
I think campaigns would be very on point with this particular subject.
Well, it's a coming together of guilds to accomplish a goal, and that goal has an end. And I think that's healthy for a campaign too, because I don't, especially with guilds, I don't think it's necessary for you to permanently ally yourself with other guilds. You have a guild and you have a responsibility to them. You don't need to have responsibilities to your alliance at the same time. That's just, it can become very taxing on your players. And I think having a natural end to a campaign upon achieving or failing to achieve its goal is pretty healthy and a cool take on alliances.
So, hey, just to wrap up this topic, as guild masters, people that have run guilds in the past and are running guilds or communities within Camelot Unchained, given that they have not developed orders and warbands beyond the initial document that they put out, what are some things, maybe one or two things real quick, that each of you hope that the order system within Camelot Change will provide either for you as a GM or for your members?
I'll go first. I would definitely love to be able to know when last login, especially at an API level. I think activity and being able to track it, especially when you have members that play when you're not even necessarily online, is crucial. And so being able to track that stat of just knowing a person's logging in and doing something is quite crucial. And it takes a big burden off of kind of your officers too. And the second thing I would say is some form of guild taxation as well. I think it was a really cool thing that Dark Age did, and making it fixed is kind of cool, but it allowed guilds to generate their own funds without necessarily taking from the players. Because I remember in Dark Age, it didn't take your money, it just created 5% more and added that on top. And I think that was a really cool method. But even if it takes, that's fine too, because that could be something you guys as a guild kind of work out what is an appropriate tax. But I think earning funds outside of player donation, having it automated, is very crucial to building a war chest.
CSE JB says that's confirmed.
Nice.
Right on.
He says to give him something harder. All right, next.
I'll give him something harder.
Do
well,
it.
Right
Hey, you keep that in your pants.
Never.
Wow.
Never.
All right, come on, Zeb.
But honestly, the thing that I would like to see is something based on the UI and the communication tools given in game. Because I may not be able to communicate with all of my people through Discord or TeamSpeak, but going through the UI of the game is still going to be important as a guild, as an order. So we definitely need that particular function to happen. Communication tools specifically geared towards ignoring Discord and ignoring TeamSpeak, imagine they're not there, because unfortunately that's part of the reason people are going to stick to guilds, is that communication tool.
I would personally like tools. This can kind of be geared towards commanders as well as guilds. A chat channel for guild leaders and commanders, something for coordination and that kind of thing. This kind of ties into the whole campaigns thing, as well as the ability to pull up the map and put markers on it for your guild members or anyone on your faction to see it. Limit it to commanders. I'm thinking of the commander system from Guild Wars 2 as well.
Guild Wars 2 had that.
As well as what's available in PlanetSide 2. I would like to also see stuff like flares. You could work this with like the mage classes, or you can have like an item that you can like shoot up flares into the air that other people can see. Maybe you can use it for coordination, but also the enemy can see that too. They may not know what it means, but you kind of got a double-edged sword there. That
might be tricky with draw distance, though.
Maybe.
Unless it was a dynamic static object that was kind of painted on the horizon.
I'm thinking of like a smoke flare rather than a bright flare.
But having it done by players and not just a marker that is created by the game to mark something, I think would add a lot along the same lines as to what CSE is doing with the development of the game. And it could be really cool.
Like maybe if I send a small strike team to kind of go around to keep and behind it, maybe I want them to, send up a flare to let me know if their mission was a success or not.
Well, and what actually would be a really good combo with that, honestly, is shoot up a flare and it causes a blink or a marker on the map. So then you have the combo effect. So then now that you solve the draw distance.
Yeah. Being able to do a map that everybody on your campaign can see and you can mark it up and go off of that would be pretty awesome.
Both for campaigns and guilds, I think that would be a fantastic tool. Is something, not only can you mark it up right now for this, but I would like to see something that was long-term marked up. So like say I log in and I know I'm not going to be on tonight, but I want my guild to be pushing certain objectives. And I want to be able to basically build a tactical map where I can go, we need to take this. This is first priority, this is second priority, third priority. This needs to be teared down. This needs to be done, ... Now, that would be cool to be able to build a map where your guild can then pull up and go, all right, what are the objectives for today? I would also mix that with, I would like not only Message of the Day. Message of the Day is a great tool in many ways, but I would like to be able to set a Message of the Day that might be able to spam. And I don't mean that in a like maybe once an hour, maybe once every 2 hours, whatever you can set it for, but something that's constantly putting out a reminder.
Would @login be enough for you?
No,
@login's pretty common.
Right, @login is fine, but I want it more. I would like to have certain reminders in give, hey guys, drive this objective. Hey guys, do this. Things like that. That would basically allow you to further information and be the 24-hour general without being on 24 hours.
I think that's a lot of the information that's displayed right at login. I think it's lost, especially when you dig in and figure out what you're actually wanting to do for the day. Or if you log into a busy area, then you've just got a lot of spam on your screen, and whatever chunks in right as you're loading in typically gets lost on some games. So having that ability to respam that on people's screens instead of just going in and hitting enter on it again, which is how you used to do it in the old times, because then it would just automatically flash it up. That would be a really cool thing to be able to do, but also some tools there to prevent
it seems like it could be very easily abused.
Yeah.
Well, but then do you really want to be in the guild, the guild leader who's abusing it? See, that just becomes a part of that.
It's Darwinism in action. I totally agree with it.
Yeah, as Plague Star says, the message of the day typically gets lost due to load-in times.
Yep.
So, all right. Anything else that you'd like to see guilds being or orders being a benefit for you as GMs or for your members? We haven't given anything to COC JB in chat yet, where he's popped out his eyeballs.
I will say, beyond guild and more to like a server leadership role. Again, referencing Guild Wars 2, I love the idea of commander tags. I love the idea of commander tags being visible on an overworld map where everyone online can see this tag and essentially denote that this person is someone who is trying to lead a combined offensive. And having some way of denoting commanders. I know Guild Wars put it behind a paywall essentially where you had to have 100 gold, which was kind of tough. But I mean, guilds accomplished that within a couple of days, through donations. But it was a invaluable tool. And having a tool like that of being able, and this kind of goes back to the conversation of how do you engage solos, but having a tool that gives a core group that wants to invite everyone in to their offensive or defense, whatever. I think those are absolutely necessary. And I really do. And they help so much in combat, and being able to have different colors that you can coordinate around them and multiple up at the same time so that everyone can, oh, this one's purple, this guy's on the vanguard or whatever. Being able to do stuff like that is quite useful, and communicate that to your players.
I'll present kind of an interesting concept further, which is like an Arcade. Arcade has their heroes type election system.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel that the way that they actually do the election system is kind of poor in that it allows to do everything like that.
Very broke.
Right. Excluding how Arcade actually does it, do you like the concept of would it be cool if we had, like, say, campaigns that were successful, and when campaigns are succeeded, you get your guild or the leaders of those campaigns or whatever get points, and then they are considered the leaders for a month or something like that.
So I would create an item. If it were up to me, this would be the commander tag, if we want to call it that, would be required to be purchased via what would be DOC's realm points. So essentially points accrued from participation in content. So this kind of forces you to prove your mastery of the content.
Right.
Because you're forced to participate to get it. This is not money. This is not gold. This can't be traded to you, right?
Right.
You have to put the time in to get it. And whereas there might be other things you could spend this money on, you making the sacrifice to spend it on a tag shows that you at least have the mentality of a prudent leader, someone who is willing to sacrifice what would be a net gain for themselves. Maybe you can buy other stuff with those points. Maybe you can buy skill increases with those points like you could in DOC, but to put that aside for the ability to lead your troops effectively. And then at that time, you just kind of have to figure out what is a good number that would be willing to sacrifice. That is hopefully with obtainable within a decent amount of time, but is a big enough sacrifice that's like someone that is not interested in that would not want to purchase it and abuse it. And you could have something where they expire after a month or so. And so that's something that a commander, like, they constantly have to make that sacrifice if they want to continue being able to lead. And that might be a great way of handling it. So that way they can get it within the first week, and it's something they constantly have to pay to upkeep if leading is something that's valuable to them. And if it's not, then they don't have to pay it. But that keeps you from having this flood of, every person on the server's got a commander tag, then they'll just troll and abuse, which will happen. But that keeps you from having that. And the people that have them are people that are willing to sacrifice their time and those points for the purpose of being more effective leaders.
Zeb, you got anything else to add to that?
No, the guys have covered it real well.
Okay. Taco?
Capes. I want gold capes.
Yes! We want cloaks! Old cloth physics!
Can
I
you do
want
that
individual
NVIDIA physics.
strands of
When I see
hair.
that NVIDIA physics brand on load, I don't want it for server side. I want the client side client.
I want individual strands of hair on each figure,
Yes,
please.
NVIDIA hair works. NVIDIA hair works on my horsetail.
All right, so guild or order capes. Can you whip that up for us there, JB?
Oh God!
That would be
Need guild order capes. Need guild order shields.
Rest assured,
Need
we're not
guild
the only
order.
people.
I'm all about wearing logos. It's the greatest thing about DAOC was
Yeah.
running around with your
We'll
guild
Okay.
logo on your shield and your
We'll
cloak.
be NASCAR.
jumping
Great
back.
big,
Jumping back,
great big
CCJB
banners.
says that he would argue that a commander system like Guild Wars 2 actually devalues guilds, encouraging more Zerg play and having randoms just follow a targeted player around the map. How do you guys
That's
respond to
actually a
that?
fair point.
No, it very much is a good point. But it's one of those things where you kind of have to figure out what do you want to sacrifice and how do you engage the people that are not coming into Camelot Unchained with a guild. And if there is another system in place to get them in a guild, then yes, I think a commander tag is less necessary. So long as warbands and guilds have the ability to graphically identify their leadership. That's ultimately what you're after. Is there's a lot of moving pieces on the board, and being able to graphically identify your leader, that's the voice in your head on Discord, I feel that's quite necessary. And though it is not necessary for people outside of your group to be able to do it, that's definitely something I'd be willing to give up. I think it's a very necessary tool for people within your group to make them capable. Because if not, then you have to, like, I remember in ESO before they had a commander tag, there was an item that I got from a quest that I would use that put a beam of light on me. And so whenever we do our push, I would pop that beam of light and I'd be like, all right, everyone on me. And we'd push in and I just followed this beam of light coming off of me that lasts for 30 seconds. And I know I had that amount of time to effectively make my push. But those tools I think are absolutely necessary. But I do agree with your point that yes, it does create a sense of zerging. So controlling that vision within controlling the amount of people that can see that is definitely adds a lot of value.
I think a way to kind of fix that is to tie it to the campaign, so that if guilds are joining your campaign, then they can see the icons that are necessary.
I think multiple tiers and letting people have the choice is the best. I mean, they want all the tools possible and just be like, all right, we're going to use the campaign icon, or we'll have the party leader crown, or whatever you decide. But graphical abilities of identifying leadership or within the GUI on the screen is super duper necessary, in my opinion.
All right, gentlemen, we're
I think
at our
we've
time
established.
limit, so go ahead and hit your last
Oh.
words there.
I was going to say, I think we've established that Malice's guild is quite gooey.
Any other final words from anybody else?
I want big red banners that I can drape over my enemies' keeps so I can take them and be like,
So you want to be the Orkin man. You want to be the Orkin man, Taco.
And if it's a wooden keep and you set the banner on fire, then you lit their keep on fire, basically.
Don't look at us.
I believe we have a guild
UTD
spotlight.
There you go. We have so we're going to go into our guild spotlight. Just kind of a teaser. We're eventually going to move the guild spotlight into more of a long-term pre-recorded video that we will upload to our YouTube channel. So be a lookout there. You'll see that in the next couple of weeks. If you're interested to know about the guilds that these gentlemen with me here and some others that kind of pop in and out are running and what they're all about. We will go a little bit more in depth, but Malice, why don't you give us a couple of tidbits about your guild that are interesting and let us know what your guild is.
All right. Hi, everybody. Well, I think at its core, one of the most interesting things is that we have been long running. I would say that even though we've gone under two different names, the same people have been involved. We've been running straight for since 2001. We've built a very large community. I've experienced many different games. And honestly, because of that, we have had the pleasure of beta testing dozens of games. Pretty much every North American MMO that's been made, we have somebody or somewhere within Plague who has beta tested it, come back with all the information that we needed, and determine whether we traveled to it or not. We have traveled to many MMOs. And yeah, I've been playing MMOs since MMOs were kind of a thing back in '99. So yeah, I have a little bit of experience. Outside of that, Plague is. I don't want to say your chaotic evil guild, but we're mostly your neutral evil guild. We come with a lot of selfishness. It's funny because we talk about how to build the larger community and all the other things like that. Plague is kind of a ruthless bunch of jerks for the most part. That's kind of what we pride ourselves on.
Yeah, I think you have the largest following on Twitch right now for this video, so there's some community there.
I told all the jerks to get on.
So why do you have the name of Plague?
So the name Plague is founded under the first of all, it sounded cool.
Fair.
But at the end of the day, we wanted to be able to spread. We wanted to be able to spread across different platforms, different games, and everything like that, just like a Plague.
Why didn't y'all go with Nutella as a name? Because that's also quite spreadable.
It's very spreadable.
Nutella would actually get you further.
I have a huge vegan. Yeah, I don't know. It's not enough jerks involved in Nutella.
All right.
I was just curious.
Well, keep an eye out on the YouTube channel in the coming weeks. We will have a more lengthy guild spotlight where I actually sit down with Malice and we'll interview him about his guild and kind of dive into more of the nitty-gritty about it, who they are, what they do, and why they do what they do, and why you should consider joining them. You'll also see a video up there about Zeb's guild as well, as we did his guild spotlight last week. So looking forward to seeing you all again in 2 weeks when we gather back together with the community of guildmasters from Camelot Unchained. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.